Hi, and welcome to today's episode of Financial Fluency. Today, I have Linda Ugelow as my guest. Linda is a visibility and confidence coach, and we are going to talk about a number of financial aspects that affect women. Linda, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm really glad to be here, Jen.
So Linda, I have to admit, I kind of feel like you and I have become BFFs lately because we did this 30-day video challenge together in the fall of 2016, and we watched each other's videos every single day. I watched you travel to different countries and do videos on the top of buildings. And were you in Budapest?
Budapest?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and that was, I'll just mention, that was Neve Arthur's video challenge that we did. And it was so nice because I'd seen you in groups before, but I felt like we really got to know each other. So I know a lot about you, but I'm excited to learn more for this episode.
Yeah. I'm really glad to share.
So tell me a little bit about what a visibility and confidence coach does for people, just to start with.
Yes. So many people feel very inhibited to be seen and heard. And a lot of times they feel like they should just go do it, just go try something out. And what I do is I help clear the visibility blocks that keep people from moving forward. So it's kind of like, when you have, let's say, the burdens of past experiences, which we all have, we have comments made in our families or situations at school or friendships, or even just the culture of the mass media that make us feel somehow that we either shouldn't, or we're bad, or we're not good enough, or any of these things. So what I have found is that when you are able to identify these impacting influences and clear them away, suddenly you don't have this internal push and pull inside of, oh, I want to be seen. Oh, no, it's not safe. Or no, it feels scary. And suddenly people have so much more energy and confidence. And not just that, but they feel like putting themselves out is actually a peak experience, an experience of self-actualization, so that they can thrive in the connecting rather than it's, oh my God, I can't wait till it's over. kind of. Yeah.
That's true. You know, I have seen, I'm trying to remember exactly where it was, but there was somewhere where I saw this comment about, in polls, Americans at least, ranked a fear of public speaking higher than their fear of death.
Yeah, and I think, is it Jerry Seinfeld has a very funny quip about, you rather be in the coffin than be speaking the eulogy.
Exactly. Yeah. And that is so interesting. And I know for me, trying to get comfortable with video, I was much more comfortable with the audio first, doing my podcast without, I would film it on Skype or on Zoom, and I just threw the video away for ages. It wasn't until doing these video challenges that I started being like, this is an interesting medium. I love seeing people's faces when they're being interviewed. Why not save the video and use it? And
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, so I've started using it since, but it did take a while to feel comfortable both speaking and doing the video. Like I said, I was kind of used to audio equipment from doing music before, but isn't it funny how some people who feel comfortable singing aren't comfortable speaking?
Oh, I was that way. I've been a performer for 35 years with a music group, and I dance. That's really my comfortable medium. But it wasn't always that way. Once it became comfortable being seen, moving on stage, and I am completely comfortable now, but it took a process to get there. Mm-hmm. But I would hide behind that in order not to speak. So our director always wanted each of us to have our speaking voice heard and introduce one of the pieces that were coming up next. Mm-hmm. And I thought, oh no, I don't want to do that. So I'd have costume changes. I'd say, oh no, I can't deal with that. Everyone else take their spots. And I don't know, in the last 5 years, she began to insist that I have my spot. And it was one of those things that I'd be like sweating about it, even though it was totally prepared for like 4 songs ahead of time. I'd be like, oh no, how is it going to come out? And then when I came into the online space and, here I am, I have a master's degree in expressive therapy. So this is obviously a lifelong, learning for me. This is what I've needed to learn myself. I also had a speech impediment as a child.
So did I.
Did you really?
Speech therapy. I had a very pronounced lisp, which now that I've said it, people will probably notice the sibilance on my S's, which I still have a little, but
very slight, very, very slight. Yeah. So yeah, it's a long journey of learning to feel comfortable expressing myself in all ways, whether it's singing or moving or now speaking.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, I totally relate to that as well.
Yeah, I know when I used to perform on stage with bands, I didn't like to talk between the songs. I would never introduce songs. I would just start right in. I never wanted to be like, we've got CDs for sale. You know, I would just sing and do nothing else. So
yeah. I really feel like coming onto video can be a process of self-actualization.
mm-hmm.
So like it allows us to become more of who we can be just by the process of overcoming, you know, the blocks and learning to enjoy the process of communicating and connecting with people through our talking.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, we're more willing to do all kinds of things that we may not have been willing to do before. Like, if you were back in your band, you probably would introduce the songs. You probably would say, hey, we've got CDs for sale.
Probably, yeah.
Or you would say, hey, we've got CDs for download.
Yeah. Well, and actually, we do still do even vinyl on our label. Old school. Yeah.
That's awesome.
But I think this is an interesting segue into something that you and I have been chatting about bringing on the show. And I was really excited to have you come on because it's something that has affected my family. And I feel like it affects a lot of women nowadays. More and more wealth is coming into the hands of women worldwide. And a fair amount of it moves through inheritance, divorce settlements, inheriting from your spouse, if not your parents. And I do feel like in the online space, a lot of women don't feel comfortable talking about it and how it affects them. And just like you were saying, hiding behind performance or hiding behind different things, I feel like with women trying to achieve success in different ways, in some ways having an inheritance can sometimes hold you back even. So I'm really glad that you were willing to come on and talk about this.
Yeah.
Because, you know, especially with the baby boomer generation aging right now, a lot of people, wealth is transferring to a younger generation throughout the next 10, 20 years. And without thinking about how that's going to affect your life ahead of time, it can bring up its own challenges.
Well, to add to that, Jen, I think as women in the online space are generating more income themselves, this is an issue that they need to be more mindful about for their children.
That is true as well. Yeah.
Yep.
So we already have the wage gap. You know, we have all these ways in which women are kind of disadvantaged overall, historically, financially, especially during the times when we couldn't inherit money, when money passed from male heirs to male heir, you know, fathers to sons and skip daughters and stuff, which isn't happening anymore. But yeah, so I feel like historically women wielded the power of large amounts of wealth a lot less than men did. And somehow we often aren't really trained with exactly what to do with it if it ends up in our laps.
That's absolutely right. I know if anyone asks me what my earliest memory of money was, it was my mother asking my father for $100. And he said, June, I gave you $100 earlier this week. What did you spend it on? And I remember, and this happened more than once, and I remember thinking, I never want to have that experience, that I am dependent to ask a man for money and him grilling me on how I used it. Just that I don't want to have that part of it. And what was amazing to me is that when I graduated college, it turned out that not for reasons that my father thought I should have money or that his children should have money, but for tax purposes for his company, he and the other owners decided to change the tax structure of the company and give the money to the children. So I was both thrilled and bewildered by this exchange when it happened. And It wasn't something that I knew was going to happen. I was not prepared for it. It was just like, by the way, you now have this.
Mm-hmm. How did that affect you?
Well, on the one hand, well, I was stunned, truthfully. I was stunned. I mean, of course, I thought, wow, that's amazing. That's like totally amazing. I don't have to worry about this. On the other hand, I was poised to be like building my chops in earning money. You know, I was just getting a paycheck after college. I know it was in a restaurant, but whatever. It was still my money that I was earning.
Mm-hmm.
And I was building my dance classes. So dance was my total life. And I wanted to piece together an artistic life through dancing. And I felt like on the one hand, having that money shaved off my sense of urgency and motivation to really make it work, because it was something I could always fall back on.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, I loved the lifestyle that it afforded me. And I was not extravagant by any stretch of the word for our society here in the US. Most of my friends were starving artists, and I had a very hippie lifestyle. And I'd never really had any furniture till, I don't know, within the last, maybe 10 years ago. And, but the things I could do was self-care. So I could like get a massage every week. I could do a little bit of traveling. And the point was that I didn't have a whole lot. I couldn't spend extravagantly and live on it. I knew if I lived frugally, I could get by for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So what I actually did was I joined a group of women in Boston who had inherited wealth and attended some workshops that were given by a really wonderful foundation, which is still in operation, called the Haymarket Foundation. And they give money away to groups that really don't qualify for other ways of receiving money for what they do. And I loved the foundation. I love that it funded a lot of women's groups and change organizations. And they also cultivated their donors by offering these kinds of workshops.
Mm.
And it was a great community. It was a great place for people to be able to share that they had money, because most of us had similar lifestyles and felt guilty and ashamed.
Mm-hmm.
We thought, why did we get it and not our friends?
Yeah.
You know, it just didn't feel fair. And it felt arbitrary because we hadn't earned it.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of us were kind of very shy and kind of hiding. You know, a lot of people hid that they had money. They would buy, you know, we all bought used cars and never showed off our money in any way, because we wanted to blend in. We wanted to fit in and be liked by our friends. Mm-hmm. And so there was definitely that need to be in an environment where we could just be all of who we were, including having some money. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting, Jem. I mean, one thing I remember, it was the second year I was involved in this workshop, and we were in a circle, and we had to go around at the very beginning of the weekend and say the numbers, what our numbers were. And people were just sweating, you know, with that. It just felt so scary for people to say what they had. And I remember feeling good that I had a kind of a low number compared to other people. I mean, it was so funny. It was like that we valued not having so much. And then one woman said, I have $2 million and I'm worried that I don't have enough. And I was like floored by this. You know, I thought, wow. That was when I realized that you can have any amount of money and you can still be stressed about money.
Mm-hmm. That's true. That is true. I think sometimes the further you get away from the sustenance level, I mean, you need a certain amount of money, and it's very stressful if you don't have that much. And then there's the comfort level. And then once you get far beyond that, it seems like it kind of goes the other direction again. You get so worried about losing and not being able to. I mean, I think there's a point where a lot of people do change their lifestyle entirely, if they didn't have money before and then now do, or they're in a family that has a certain level of acceptable lifestyle that you feel like you can't go below, and yet you have all these expenses to maintain, you know. It's an interesting situation. And I know my mother also inherited some money, and she and my father, she was a musician and my father was an artist, and it was in her 30s, and so it wasn't straight out of college. They had both left college and worked some, but I know it had some really interesting effects on them too, because they were part of a group of artists living in California in a certain level. You know, they all had they would live in their studios and have these sort of storefront type studios, and nobody had a lot of money. And I think it did change things for them quite a bit, you know, and I feel like, I could be wrong here, but I feel like the guilt with inheriting money does seem to fall heavier on women from my observations, at least. What do you think about that? Being in that group?
I think that would be probably true.
Yeah.
Not that it's 100%, but I would imagine that women have a harder time with it because we're caregivers. We want to take care of other people. We want to see that people have what they need. Mm-hmm. And I know that was definitely true for me, and I have seen it with other people. We feel a responsibility to make sure that people's head are above water. I ended up, I would lend money on occasion to people, and I still do, or I gift it. And luckily, my mother modeled philanthropy. Mm-hmm. So that was very helpful for me. I was able to say, okay, I'm going to give a certain amount away every year. And that was fulfilling also, to feel like I could help other organizations or people, individuals. And I also felt like from that organization learned how important it was to be a good steward of money. So I got myself an accountant who, interestingly, after a couple of years, moved away and decided I should learn how to do my own accounting. And that was, I don't know, in the 80s. And I've done my taxes ever since then. I think this year I'm going to get an accountant for the first time. But I've been doing my own taxes for the last 30 plus years. And the other thing I learned to do was trade. I went online. I learned to, first I kind of invested with mutual funds, like socially responsible mutual funds, but I didn't really like what they were doing. So I did my own investing, and I actually was very lucky. I built my portfolio and got out of it before the crash because my husband convinced me to invest in his company. And I put all my money in his company. And
well, that's a good point too. I think we should.
Yeah. What do you think?
Well, I know that with my own mother's experience, what was modeled for her was her mother was the one whose family had money, and she married my grandfather who didn't. And then my mother ended up inheriting some money and married. Both of her husbands didn't have a significant amount of, definitely didn't have anything that would be called wealth. And I mean, this is no judgment on her or blame at all, because this is what she saw modeled, which was you pretty much hand the checkbook over to your husband. The man manages the money. And that was what I saw growing up was pretty much what you talked about, can I have $100? What did you spend it on? Not exactly, because another thing that came up with my mom was I was very little when the first divorce happened. I was 3, so I didn't really had senses and feelings towards what was going on during the divorce, not a lot of concrete memories. Whereas with her second marriage, that was me growing up through grade school and junior high and high school. Right. I very much saw that my mother was the one working outside of the home and who also had the money coming in. Her second husband had he had chronic back problems and had, I think, 4 different back surgeries while they were married. So he was on workman's comp and not working the whole time. And yet he was the one who managed all the money and made buying decisions, cars, houses, all those kind of things was always his. And I had similar feelings you had about the $100 and just being like, at first I didn't like it entirely, but as I got older and realized the money was either her working or it coming from her family, I liked it less and less to see that he had all this control over it, even though without her, he wouldn't have access to any of it. So yeah. And I think from our parents' generation into this generation, a lot of things are changing with women making more money overall, but it's the way things were always done. If a woman's family had money, a dowry went with her, but it went to the husband. It wasn't her money necessarily.
Right.
So, yeah. And I think sometimes women who inherit money can potentially be, not that I ever think anyone makes themselves into a victim, but they can potentially be targeted by people who are looking for money and feel like women who inherit money may not have as keen a sense of keeping it and investing it and being a good steward of it, who are willing to let other people make their financial decisions for them. How did it turn out with you investing in your husband's company?
Actually, it worked out better than I thought it would.
Oh, that's good. That's good that it worked out well. Why? So you did have some misgivings about it at the time?
Well, it was when you invest in a startup, you never know if you're going to get your money back. I mean, you have to, it's the risk, right?
Yep. And
it took my husband almost 20 years to be cash flow positive. But what was really nice is that they were able to juggle their financial cash flow in such a way that when the crash happened and I stopped getting any money from the family business, which I had still been getting a little bit of, that was kind of floating us, we were able to get money back from his company. Suddenly they were just at that moment, they were able to start paying us a monthly return of my investment in them. So it really worked out well. And we had to supplement it with juggling credit cards. And I have to say, I see a lot of people poo-poo credit card debt, but the way I look at it, especially because I've always thought of the money that I had unearned was kind of funny money because I didn't earn it. And I see credit card access the same way. It's like it's allowing me to use the energy of money to sustain our lives, and we have to kind of dance with it a little bit, and now we're paying it back. So it was able to float us for a number of years. That was truly a blessing. I really, really like that. And one thing that, thank God, my husband did is he was one of those people who really kept his eye on different credit card offers and was able to switch high interest rate to low interest rate and, pay off. So we got new good offers and things like that. And he really was on top of it. So I felt like he did his share of taking care of business on, our financial cash flow so it did. And it is turning out really, really well. And the other thing I'm incredibly grateful for with my husband is just modeling how to grow a business, because he started with zero.
What is his business?
So he has a ticketing software. It's similar to Eventbrite or...
Oh, okay.
And it's based in Europe. He always had this wonderful attitude of, like, I would say to him, don't you feel like there are all these big players in your field? And he said, well, there's always going to be new people coming in, and it may as well be me. And he was just undeterred. I always loved and appreciated his mindset. I saw him go through disasters, horrible catastrophes happening when the program broke down and people were in the middle of a big event or, but they always made it through. And I thought, watching them from the side, it made me realize I can do this. I mean, I've been bearing it as the kind of the partner, because I invested in it. I was very invested in how the business went. So I was very much watching and interacting with my husband and even his brother, who was a partner. It gave me a whole inside view on what is involved. And luckily, it rubbed off in such a way that several years ago, I thought, I'm ready to try this myself. And I jumped back into building a business for me that I probably wouldn't have had I not been able to see him go through all the ups and downs and challenges and continuing to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When did you start your business?
Well, it depends when you count it from. So I started a business before my online business. I was an organic farmer, and I was growing specialty vegetables for local restaurants. That was great, and it fit my introverted personality. However, I was listening to online business coaches such as Marie Forleo. Mm-hmm. As I was farming, I was applying all those concepts to that business. Found a niche market, had raving fans. One day I stood up and I said, you know what? This isn't what I'm meant to be doing in my life. Now, I had all these dreams early on of impacting a lot of people with my ideas about how to experience life, I guess. And it took me a while coming online to figure out what is it that I was going to offer people, because it wasn't an easy or obvious way to bring movement to the online space. So I thought, well, maybe there's something beyond the movement or underneath the movement that is what I'm doing, and maybe I can focus on that. It took me a couple of curves and turns to figure it out, but because of my performing experience and because of my desire to share my thinking and my perspective, it made sense for me to start speaking more. So that's when I started to do more videos, and I've taken a lot of different video challenges. And I listened to people struggling with their fears. And I thought, you know what? I think I can help them with that. I wanted something that was really practical for people, but also met my desire to go deeper into making the experience of life as good as it can be. So it's like, how do we make the experience of being on a TV show or a podcast or on video as good as we can be? Like, we feel our presence, we feel the connection, we feel a sense of authority or power. Yeah.
Well, I have to admit, watching your videos, especially during that challenge we both did where I saw so many of them, you do have such a calm and a sense of presence that I find really reassuring. Like, I missed it when the video challenge ended and I wasn't seeing everyone.
That's so cute. Thank you.
I don't know what's going on with Linda. Is she traveling? Where is she?
I know. I kind of disappeared. Yes, that's why I'm liking that there's a new challenge coming up, because it keeps me on the roll.
Yeah. That's why I keep doing them too, is I feel like there is so much connection within the group itself that I really like. But I feel like you're very good at that. I wouldn't have realized had you not told me that you'd had a speech impediment or that you used to fear doing it, because you seem so comfortable and centered. Also, pauses, taking breaths, those are things I definitely used to not do. When I listened to some of my first episodes, especially solo episodes where I wasn't waiting for somebody to answer, I would just kind of rush through everything and be talking really fast and try to get to the next thing and think that made me sound like I knew what I was talking about if I didn't stop to breathe at all.
Right.
And now I realize it's exhausting for the listener too.
Yeah.
Like, we all need to
take a breath.
Take a breath. We need to relax. We need to feel comfortable. We need to have nice conversations. That's what's comfortable for people to listen to.
Yeah, we also, as you say, for the listener, they need to be able to catch up and integrate what we're saying, what we're talking about, so it helps them as well.
Mm-hmm. So I think you're a good example of what you're trying to teach.
Thank you so much.
But I would love to also bring in the two things we've talked about now and kind of bring them together: starting your own business and having inherited some money or having some money from an outside source in some way. Because I think you and I have talked about this briefly. I've sometimes felt this, and I feel like it can, in some ways, make you feel less successful in your endeavor if you have some help backing you. You know, like, oh, I didn't completely bootstrap it all by myself. I didn't go from being on welfare to being a millionaire completely on my own. You know, like some of these stories that we read in newspapers and hear about online. How has that been for you?
That definitely played into my mind mess, I guess I could say, because when I started my business, which I never answered your question, I would say it was about 1.5 years ago when I started this present work that I'm doing.
Okay.
I was bootstrapping it, and I felt really proud. And I felt like as I figure this out, I'll be able to help the next generation of people who don't have money to invest necessarily, and I'll be able to help show some of the possible paths that they can take. Mm-hmm. And I became attached to that possibility. And then my mother passed away last year, and suddenly I had some inheritance, and that I could use to invest in my own company. Now, many, many, many companies start off with an investment. Mm-hmm. So it's not like that's an unusual thing at all. But there is some kind of a badge of honor or a panache, or, you know, something that we find very romantic about starting from nothing. It's the American dream. Mm-hmm. And so I felt for several months this struggle within myself of, you know, knowing I wanted to invest this money in my company, but feeling like I was somehow cheating. And that, as you said, that it was going to devalue my work in some way. Mm-hmm. This investment. I had to do a lot of money block clearing for that, because, you know, I want to feel like I am welcoming the money that comes into my life. If I'm pushing it away, how am I expecting to bring in money for my business? And why should I value one set kind of money more than another kind of money? Money is money. Mm-hmm. So it did take me a while. Now I feel like I'm more in alignment, but it definitely was a challenge for me to take on. How am I going to bring myself, so I am not carrying it as a burden, rather I'm carrying it as rocket fuel.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I do know that in some of the online spaces that I'm in where we do talk about money, there are a lot of women who have this feeling of like, this is good money. This is money I earned. This is money that is mine and that is worthy and is important. And this money over here is not how I want to be getting it. Therefore, I'm not comfortable with this other money from my family, money from a divorce, money from whatever. But you're right. Money's just money.
And we need to be good stewards of all the money that we are blessed to receive. Mm-hmm. And if we think of, you know, towards, let's say we are as successful financially as we want to be, and we build our wealth and we pass it on to our children, what is it that we want them to be able to do with it? Mm-hmm. How are we going to prepare them for being good stewards?
I think that's a really good point, especially for people like yourself and my mother who felt like they weren't necessarily entirely prepared when it happened, and didn't give a lot of thought ahead of time to what they were going to do with it. So I think that is true. If we are going to be passing wealth on to our children, what do we want it to enable them to do? At the same time, without doing too many strings. I know sometimes when parents try to leave things to children with all these conditions and strings, that can make a lot more complications and some resentments and things. But at the same time, isn't that kind of what we want? I mean, overall, don't we all want our children to have more opportunities and do better than we did? I mean, that's kind of been an ongoing thing that I think this generation, I know during the recession, it was talked about one of the few generations that seem to have lowered prospects than their parents. You know, generation after generation, we kind of kept increasing what our hopes for our children were. And then there was this generation of people who had struggled to get jobs when they got out of college, had really struggled to have any kind of retirement savings and things like that, who possibly have lowered lifetime expectations for wealth than their parents might have.
I felt that way about my generation.
Yeah?
Yeah. I mean, we were all hippies. We weren't interested in money. We thought money was bad. We thought rich people were.
So a lot of the hippies turned into yuppies.
Yes, they did. They did indeed.
Yeah.
But still, it didn't happen in their 30s. It happened, in their 20s. It probably happened more in their 30s. So when I hear that, to me, it doesn't feel like it really is meaningful. I feel like it's very common for people to struggle in their 20s to figure out what is it that they want to do, where is their place in the world. Mm-hmm. And I feel like they have the opportunities like everybody else has opportunities. And that's why I love entrepreneurship in the online world, is that there are the possibilities for you to create something that is valuable and meaningful and fits your personal lifestyle more.
That is true, though some of the older options are no longer as viable as they used to be, like that working for a company for 30 years, 40 years, retiring. That has gone away. Absolutely. But it does gives us a lot more control over our personal destiny in some ways. I mean, we're the ones now who decide what to sell and what to do if we can't get that kind of job.
Absolutely. And the possibilities that are available to us now, everybody can go on and do a podcast or a TV show. We have these things were relegated to people with a lot of money and power in the past.
Mm-hmm. That is true.
So the possibilities now are enormous.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel that in terms of, let's say, passing on a nest egg to our children is more about helping them to identify what they feel a life worth living is about, and identify ways that they feel compelled to make a difference in the world, and to understand the possibilities of creating those dreams to put those dreams into action. So which having money can do. So whether it's starting an organization or a foundation or a business or being a philanthropist. I mean, it could be any number of things that a person can decide is the right thing for them. My parents didn't put any strings on me. I really appreciated that. I appreciated that they trusted me to make good decisions. And I feel like I did. Maybe they weren't the ones that they would have made, but I loved making my own decisions. That was very empowering to say, I'm going to do the best I can with this.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great. You know, it is interesting about all the things that are available now. Like for my own kids, my youngest daughter, Miffy, and I make up stories a lot at night. Like we read a lot of books together, but I've started typing up some of her stories, and she came up with one the other night that I was like, I have to show a few people this. It was so good. And I've been trying to get her to illustrate it, but now that I was like, this is actually good enough that we should get it made into a book, which you can do so easily now, or even just like my kids' art. That's Miffy's drawing of a rainbow unicorn on my mug. If you're listening to this on iTunes, you can go to YouTube and see my daughter's drawing on a mug. I'm actually wearing a t-shirt with one of her drawings on it right now too, because it's easy to do that now. There are all these ways you can get things printed and made. And I was like, gosh, if I'd realized that when I was a kid, that I could actually make a book, a real book, oh my gosh, how exciting would that have been? And our kids can do that through technology now. So it's interesting to see all of the opportunities available in such low-priced ways now. I mean, you can upload something to Create Space or somewhere and have, 10 books printed and give them to your family. And that used to be, again, used to have a publisher and a lot of money to get a nice hardback book that looks professional. Now we can just make them how we want, which is pretty exciting.
It is really exciting. It is really exciting.
Yeah. And the idea of what we want for our children is really interesting too. I remember having a talk with someone at a wedding a while ago about, this person was telling me that the father of this other person, if he wanted, could make it so that this individual we were talking about never had to worry about money for the rest of her life. Like, why wouldn't he just do that for her? And I had to say, well, maybe that's not what he wants for her. Maybe what he wants isn't for her to never think about money for the rest of her life. I mean, not all parents who are wealthy want their children to just have it easy and never think about how they want to be productive in life. You know, a lot of, I think that's where sometimes the strings get attached, is like, okay, you have to be married by 30, or you have to, once this happens, once you finish law school or med school or whatever, then you inherit this money. But at the same time, it's like how to do it while allowing your children to still have all the experiences and, you know, positive and negative that create character, and go into living a rich and textured life.
Yeah. I mean, as I'm listening to you speak, I'm realizing I had a little worry come up in me.
Yeah? What was that?
You know, I was thinking of, I was thinking about my husband's company, and of course we have one child, so she'll be inheriting from both of us.
Mm-hmm.
And inheriting, let's say, his company or part of his company, I mean, that's like, whoa, I haven't even begun to think about the impact of that on a child, to like what it must be to create a company and then have your children be the beneficiaries of that.
Mm-hmm.
And the responsibilities that go along with it, and needing to, I mean, that really does take preparation.
Mm-hmm.
And
If the plan is for them to run the company.
Exactly. So it makes me realize, oh, we've got some work ahead here.
Well, and that's another question, is does she ultimately want to run a company like that? Or would she rather be an owner, a silent owner in the back, and you have a CEO who continues to run? I mean, there are a lot of options when it comes.
Yes, there are.
And my mother's family had some complicated family trusts and sort of financial interweavings that sometimes involved the children in business dealings that they would not have necessarily gotten themselves into. And ultimately everyone sold out, which is, you know, when you have 5 kids involved in a family trust, not everyone's going to agree on everything. With one child, that's probably a lot easier, actually.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's something to think about. I mean, how much do we want to impose on our kids, and how much do we want to potentially take away from them in terms of experience, or give to them in terms of experience?
Yeah, it's a big question.
Yeah.
And, you know, for some reason, like coming into this conversation, I thought that I have had my mind wrapped around it. And as we're speaking, I'm realizing that there's even more to think about and talk about with our daughter. And I don't know if like this year is the year that we need to do it, but pretty soon. She's in college now, so she's certainly mature enough to start having some of these conversations, just like what you say, like, what do you think the impact of inheriting money will be? Do you think it'll be a positive one? Do you think it'll be a hardship?
Mm-hmm.
How much do you feel, you know, so because we can, in fact, make different choices in what we leave to our kids. We can,
Mm-hmm.
and leave a lot in philanthropy.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people are doing that now. Mm-hmm. So I've noticed these pledges of billionaires, like giving half of their estates to different charities of different kinds. So it is an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll have to talk about this again in a year or so and see the progress. Yes. But thank you so much for coming on the show and talking to me about this, because you know, just what you brought up, the guilt, the hiding the wealth when you feel like other people around you don't have as much and you feel uncomfortable with it. I think it's something that doesn't get discussed openly all that much. So it was great to have this conversation with you.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciated your interest and willingness to kind of take the plunge with me.
Sure thing. And if anyone listening is interested in more confidence in getting visible and speaking either on video or on stage, I will have some links to Linda's website so you can find her and get more comfortable.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Jen.
Thanks. Bye, Linda.
Bye.